Alrighty, everyone. Well, hey, we are gonna get started. Thank you all so much for your interest in our ongoing financial wellness webinar series. I am out of state today, so that's why we're not doing a live presentation. I'm going to a dear long-term friend's wedding out in colorful Colorado. So I am recording this preemptively and I'm going to send it out to everybody that does sign up for the webinar here. Today it's Monday, so we're going to be doing it on Wednesday. So why don't we just jump into the meat and potatoes of our presentation today? And this is a really popular topic for folks. We're going to be talking all about how to take control of debt. As we're going to kind of go through here, debt is arguably something that's a part of every single person's financial situation. So we do want to make sure to address it, share with all of you some strategies that you might be able to employ to, give you peace of mind, let you know that you're at least on track to reduce these debts or get rid of them. Give you some clarity as to how long that's going to take, as well as what kind of financial commitment that's going to be. And, all in all, just give you a strategy moving forward. Okay. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. If this is your first webinar, you might not know me. Some of you I see sign up for all of them, which I appreciate. So my name is Lucas Amell. I'm a fully licensed fiduciary financial planner. I practice out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. However, I work with clients all over the country at this point. Some education about me. I went to a small private college called Carroll University over in Waukesha, Wisconsin, studied finance, financial planning, taxes as well. Then, in terms of experience, I went out, I started my own practice, but at the same time, too, I worked as the director of financial operations for a very, substantial family financial services tax preparation practice. So I've been doing this, swimming in this space, knowing, all the different ins and outs of personal finance now for 8 years. So I've worked with thousands of different households, kind of have been able to see and learn from basically any kind of situation under the sun. So that's why I like to do these, is being able to share some of my stories that I've picked up over the years about, helping different families, what other people are doing, and being able to give people that I talk to some kind of benchmark. Because I think one of the main things that people ask me when they're first, sitting down is like, hey, am I doing okay comparative to, my peers or other people in my industry, et cetera, et cetera. My why is ultimately working in this space for the past 8 years. I've truthfully seen most things that can go right, as well as most things that can go wrong when it comes to somebody's financial journey, whatever age they are. So, what I love to do and why I choose to do these webinars for folks is being able to share those stories so that you can feel a little more inspired to be proactive when it comes to your financial situation in comparison to being reactive. Something happens and you're like, what do I do? Well, if you're proactive, most of the times, you already have a contingency plan in place for, hey, that rainy day that we planned for finally came, open up the umbrella. So that's my job, helping people have the umbrella and knowing how to use it. Organizationally, a lot of people get confused about this. It's kind of like those little Russian talking head dolls. I own and operate my own practice. However, it's a thing within a thing of another thing, right? So on the right side there, you kind of see how the things get broken down. So I am an agent of Mass Mutual. They're a very large Fortune 100 financial services company. They do insurance, they do financial planning, investment management. Then it's further broken down into the West Point Financial Group. So what that is it's an agency within Mass Mutual. So Mass Mutual is a nationally recognized company. They've got agents and offices in pretty much all 50 states. What West Point is a collective grouping of about 400 advisors like myself that are officed and, domiciled in the Midwest. So we have offices in Wisconsin, Illinois, Ohio, Indiana. We're slowly branching out more and more as well because West Point offers us so many services that can benefit our clients. Lastly, I am a managing partner of the Lettenberger Financial Group. So it's me and three other advisors. Collectively, we're overseeing $250 million at this point, just working with a lot of different people. So I've got a lot of what I'm trying to say is just I have a lot of collective experience to kind of talk about these things. When it comes to areas of focus, I am studied and expert in retirement income planning, tax planning, estate planning, financial planning as a broad-based, saving for college. Like I said, I've kind of done everything under the sun at this point. That's why I feel that Advocate lets me do these webinars for folks, as they know that I'm not just out here to sell stuff. I really know what I'm talking about, and I'm communicating valuable topics with the employee base, right? So enough about who I am not, right? I am not a lawyer, nor am I a licensed practicing CPA or certified public accountant. I do work with those individuals in different capacities, but everything that I'm going to be sharing with you folks today is meant to be treated purely from an informational standpoint. Okay, so none of this is going to be specific tax, legal, or even financial planning advice. This is just to be general in nature. Hopefully, you're able, wherever you are, whatever walk of life you are in your personal financial journey, I'm hoping that you're able to get some golden nuggets that you can take and apply today. All right. So I mentioned that this is a part of an ongoing series, this financial well-being. We've been doing one of these webinars every month for the past 2 years. And depending on your employer, whoever you're joining with, Advocate Aurora, we've been doing this for the longest time. I think this is the 25th or 26th one that we've done. And realistically, every different one that we do focuses on some different topic, but all of them can be encompassed into these four main categories. Okay. First and foremost, having control over our day-to-day or our month-to-month finances. This can be, summed up as having a budget, having control over your cash flow. All right. So having control over your cash flow arguably is the number one building block that you really need to build a solid financial empire for you and your family. It's one of the most commonly overlooked things when it comes to financial planning that I would say that I see is, I always ask people, well, hey, what's coming in every month? What's going out and where it's going? And most people truthfully cannot answer what's coming in. So what's actually hitting your bank account every month from your job, from your side businesses, from your rental properties, etc. Then taking that, okay, what came in? Well, where is it going, right? What kind of expenses do we have? Are those expenses fixed? Are they variable? Are they wants? Are they needs? It's important for an individual or a household to really start to get an understanding of how cash is flowing within their household. So that's going to be pivotal and paramount when we're looking at, okay, establishing some type of debt repayment plan. In order for you to do that, you need a very sound foundational understanding of what's happening with your cash flow. Second pillar of financial well-being here, having the capacity to absorb some type of a financial shock. All right. So a financial shock, of course, is any unforeseen expense, whether it's medical related, whether you're moving, whether you lost a job, you lost a spouse, something like that, a significant shock to your financial system. What are you going to do about it? Right. So the second foundation here of financial wellness or financial well-being is having the capacity to absorb one of those shocks. What's the best way to do that? Is having some type of an emergency fund and having some kind of contingency plan as to knowing, hey, if all of a sudden I need to pay an extra $5,000 this month above and beyond my basic living expenses, how am I going to do that? And how can I do that effectively? Okay. So, there's a lot of studies that are out there that say, over 60% of American citizens do not have in excess of $500 in terms of a savings account. It's very important that you have some kind of an emergency fund for your situation. Typically the rule of thumb in the financial world is 2 to 3 months worth of income set aside somewhere that's highly liquid. So, like a high yield savings account, something of that nature. Our third pillar here of financial well being is being on track to meet your financial goals. Of course, you cannot be on track to meet financial goals if you don't have them. So, that's one of the first steps is really laying out what your goals are, what you're trying to accomplish, setting some kind of realistic benchmarks and then systematically going in and saying, hey, here's what I want to accomplish at X year. Here's what I need to be doing today to make sure that I'm tracking towards that goal. And then consistently be reviewing your goal and your progress towards accomplishing it. Now, by doing that, it's just going to give you a lot of clarity, a lot more peace of mind, and a lot more confidence spending the money that you do have. Then lastly, the fourth pillar of financial well-being is having the financial freedom that allow you to make the choices that you want to make in life, whether that's living in a certain type of house or community, sending your kids to a certain type of school, having a certain type of retirement at a certain age. This really blends all of the things together from having control to your budget, having a contingency fund set aside, having goals that you're pacing. By doing all those things, you kind of do unlock this fourth pillar of, hey, you have this financial clarity and confidence, right? So let's kind of jump into our main topic for today is debt, right? This is a huge thing. I hear about it all the time. It's probably one of the most primary concerns for people that I'm meeting with, especially if they're on the younger end of the age spectrum. And when I say younger end of the age spectrum, I'm talking 20s, 30s, and 40s. But truthfully, I see people still struggling with these concepts in their 50s and beyond, right? So, based on some studies that we've seen, and these are back in 2020, so the numbers likely have ticked up. I'm surprised that my back office didn't just update these numbers. But, on average, here is what we're looking at for debts in households. So, a lot of you might be on the call today worried, like, hey, I have credit card debt, or hey, I won't allow it on my vehicle, or hey, I still am paying back student loans. These are the average numbers that we were seeing in 2020, right? So the average individual in 2020 was carrying a credit card balance of $6,900. The average individual has an auto loan of $28,600. And then the average person's carrying a student loan today of $58,300. So these are all significant numbers. And I understand the gravity that it holds on people, especially if they don't have a plan. They look at that credit card debt number and they're saying, hey, I don't know how I'm ever going to get $7,000 ahead of this thing. I'm making minimum payments and I feel like it's barely tackling my interest. That's correct. That's how credit card companies operate. That's how they make their money. They want you to stay in debt as long as possible. Okay. And that's true for auto loans. That's true for student loans. That's why these things can really compound because then all of a sudden you get married and these numbers double. It's very real. So, what do we do about this? If you're in these situations or you're really struggling with one of these facets that we're looking at, first of all, know you're not alone, right? These are averages. There's people that have significantly higher numbers than this. There's people that have significantly lower numbers than this. It's all about understanding your situation and knowing, okay, well, what can I do to improve this? What can I do to assure that I'm at least on track to be out of this situation in 5 years, 10 years? What does that look like? Right. So let's kind of jump into our agenda for today about that. And hopefully, like I said, no matter where you are, you're able to gain something from this presentation. Okay. So our agenda for today, first of all, we need to understand our debt. What's out there, really taking an inventory and looking and saying, hey, going back to this, I've got this much in credit card debt. I've got this much in auto payments. I've got this much in student loans. Really take inventory and understand what kind of debts are out there. What are you liable for to pay back, right? Second item on the agenda is classifying our debts. Once we've taken an inventory, looked at everything that's out there, then we need to say, okay, well, this debt is this, and it's at this interest rate, and really making a spreadsheet. And I'll jump into it a little later, but it's very helpful for you to just see everything consolidated in one place so that you can start to come up with a plan to get ahead of it and most importantly, get out of it, right? Third item on the agenda, creating a debt payment plan. Okay, this is what's going to give you the confidence and the clarity knowing, hey, it's only if I do this for this long based on my numbers, I'll be out of debt in 4 years or in 7 years. Whatever that number is, once you know it, you're going to have a lot of more peace of mind knowing you're going and rowing in the right direction. Right. And then lastly, we're going to hit on an important concept of balancing debt as well as other financial goals. A lot of people, when they're in debt, they think that it makes the most sense to allocate all of their free cash flow to paying down their debts. Now, that is beneficial. However, as we're going to hit on in some later slides in the presentation, it's maybe not always the most optimal course towards financial wellness. All right. So hang tight. I'm talking a lot. I got to stay hydrated. All right, so first agenda item, like I said, let's understand our debt. So one of the ways that we can really understand our debt, first of all, really, like I said, take a line item of everything you owe that's out there. So your student loans, your credit card debts, maybe you have a couple different credit cards. Most people do. Start taking inventory and say, hey, my Walmart card has this balance, and then go a little bit further. Okay, and say, okay, well, here's the interest rate that's on it. So, this one's 15%. Honestly, most credit cards today are closer to 30%. That's kind of the average that I see is like 29.6 is like the average that's out there. But when I'm saying what's the true cost of our debt, once we know, hey, I owe this much on my Walmart card, it's at this interest rate. Well, what you can really do and start piecing together is saying, hey, if I make my minimum payment of this, I'm going to be in debt for 4.5 years based on this example. Let's look at the example, right? So you have $2,000 on a credit card that's charging you 15% interest rate, and you're going to make a payment of $50 a month every month. There's a bunch of free calculators on the internet, so you can actually figure out how long it's going to take to have that paid back, assuming you're not adding to it, which is a dangerous thing. And I see a lot of people do it, but you got to spend money to live, right? So really understand, hey, if I took this $2,000 purchase out and they're charging me a 15% interest rate and I'm going to pay it back $50 a month until it's gone, well, it's going to take 4.5 years. And in actuality, you don't owe $2,000, you owe 3,100. So being able to extend these debts and these loans out to what their maturity would be is going to really help conceptualize the type of debts that you're dealing with. Now, if you do this with a house and a 30-year mortgage, you're going to be very surprised by how much you're paying for your house. Now, not all debt's bad debt, as we're going to jump into, but like I said, it's helpful for you to just understand, okay, well, I have this debt, it's at this balance, it's at this rate, and I'm throwing this much a month at it. What does that debt actually cost me over the period of that loan? So by doing that, you're going to just start to understand your debt, right? So really get a good picture on, okay, well, what's the interest rate that I'm being charged? A lot of these credit card companies, going back to this example, they'll waive the interest rate period for like a period of 1 year as a teaser rate to get you to place your debt with them. However, once that teaser year is gone or their 18-month promotion, whatever that looks like, then it's going to switch over to 29.5% interest. So really be clear about what the interest rate on your loan is, if it's subject to fluctuation and when those fluctuations occur, because it's very, very important that you have an understanding of the contract that you're already in, right? Know if that interest rate on the debt that you have is fixed or if it's variable, right? So a lot of people, I see this run into like with the student loans, for example, they took out variable loans because at the time when they were being issued, they were really, really low. The interest rate was 2% or 3%, something like that. Well, we've been living in a very high interest rate society, at least high comparatively to that last decade that we just came out of, where during COVID, people were getting mortgages for like 2.25%. Well, now I'm seeing people get them for 7. So knowing whether or not a loan's rate is fixed or variable is very important. I'm a bigger fan of fixed rates just because it's way easier for you to run the calculations from a goal setting standpoint. A lot of people that have variable student loans, in my opinion, really do benefit from refinancing to a fixed rate loan, most often based on where we are now, especially too, if the Fed cuts interest rates this September, which they're saying they're going to. It's not official yet. I think we're going to find that out like this week, actually. So just having an understanding, what's my rate? Is it fixed? Is it variable? What's the actual cost of it if I hold it to maturity or based on my payment schedule? One thing to keep in note too is really understand whether or not there are early repayment penalties on these loans. I see a lot of providers nowadays doing that where, you tell them, hey, I want this to be a 7-year term, like say on a car note, right? I want this to be a 7-year term. Okay, here's my monthly payment. It's $400 a month. Well, what if you want to pay an extra $400? Maybe you came into some money or you were really tight on your budget and lived a little frugally for a month and you want to throw that extra $400 at it. So basically making a payment on top of your payment. Some carriers, especially when it comes to car loans, I've noticed, they will have like an early repayment penalty where they're actually charging you to pay additional. Usually you don't want those unless it actually makes financial sense. That's why you do want to work with a professional when you're coming up with a debt repayment plan. Okay. And yeah, that's kind of knowing the terms of the debt, like knowing if there's any contingency clauses within the contract that you're in to be in the debt. Hey, if I repay this faster, it is what it is, or do I get penalized? A lot of these providers will actually work with you without penalizing to change the terms of your loans. I see that done with student loans very, very frequently, where you can go on an income-based repayment plan and they'll make the number that you're liable to pay every month a little lower. There's a lot of ways that you can kind of tweak these, but like I said, the first and foremost, most important thing when it comes to debt and creating a debt repayment plan is understanding what kind of debts that you have. If you need help taking an inventory on that, me or one of my junior advisors can help put together a spreadsheet for you at no cost. Okay. Classifying our debt. So this is the next one. Now that we know our debts, we understand what they are, we know what's going on, we need to start classifying them in a couple different categories, right? So there's good debt and bad debt. Debt, it of course has a negative connotation, but it shouldn't, right? So when we're looking at this, good debt is any kind of debt that's going towards building your net worth or increasing your ability to earn an income. Okay. So for example, when we look at it, education, right? Maybe it costs you $60,000, $70,000 to get your bachelor's degree or even your master's degree that you owe loans on now. Yes, it's debt. However, it's considered good debt because you exchanged your time as well as a portion of your money, maybe money that you don't even have yet, right? To get some kind of specialization, get income driving skills that you can bring to the marketplace. You can't become a nurse if you didn't go to school, or you didn't go to nursing school. So it's worth it because now instead of working as a CNA, maybe making 40, $50,000 a year, you're working as a nurse making 80, $90,000 a year. That's considered a good trade-off. So it's not something that you should be embarrassed about that you are carrying student loans to get the education that you have, because it allowed you to operate in a career that generates substantially more money, right? Same with a mortgage. A mortgage is a considerable commitment of financial resources. However, once you're on the terms of the mortgage, a mortgage is meant to be paid off in 30 years. Some people pay it off quicker, but as you're paying it off, your debt's decreasing, but you're also building equity, right? So you're building equity in a home. You can take that equity with you forever. So if you move and you buy a new house, you find your dream house, you can roll your equity in to help with the down payment. Or if you choose to completely downsize, you can sell your house and start renting. And hey, if the home's paid off, maybe that's $300,000 in your pocket. Now, there's tax consequences, but like I said, I'm not a practicing CPA, so I'm not going to talk about it. Going into debt for any kind of business, this is huge. I mean, businesses typically in the first 1 to 3 years really don't generate a lot of revenue. The business owner needs to rely heavily on debt and be able to leverage that debt to create some kind of reoccurring and consistent revenue. Otherwise, it's not a business. Now, what are some bad debt examples, right? So, of course, credit cards. Typically, we're never buying anything really on a credit card that has lasting financial value that's building up your net worth. Typically, it's buying clothes, buying food, paying for gas, all that fun stuff. Now, it's bad debt. I see people doing this all the time is they're living above what their means are. So say they're making $3,000 a month after taxes. That's what's hitting their checking account. But they're spending $3,500 a month on their credit card because their minimum payment is only $75 a month. And they're like, I could do $75 a month. And then you slowly dig yourself into this deeper and deeper hole because unfortunately you're living a lifestyle that you actually can't afford. And it's really easy to because you just have this plastic money thing in your pocket all the time that you can buy whatever you want, even if you can't afford it. So they can be very dangerous. Credit cards are a slippery slope. However, you need to build credit, and it's very helpful for, basically borrowing from yourself if you're using them responsibly. Some other examples of bad debt that I see: costly vacations. Once again, this comes down to the living above your means kind of thing, where, I'm seeing people who are, living paycheck to paycheck, not in a bad way. They're earning a good income, they're still saving for retirement, stuff like that. But instead of saving for a vacation, they'll just take out a credit card with the cruise company or something like that, that they're going on a cruise. Hey, the cruise says, hey, we have this layaway payment plan that you can do. Instead of paying $5,000, just pay us $100 a month for the next couple of years. It's not always the best situation to get yourself in. However, it's a tool that's out there for you financially. Just know that it ends up costing more over the long time. And it just typically stresses people out having more and more debt. Impulse purchases, of course, bad debt. Nobody needs 3 cars. Some people do. I know some people that need 3 cars. So once we've kind of done that, we've classified good debt, bad debt. Let's look at priorities, right? Starting to prioritize them. And when it comes to creating a debt repayment plan, this is where a lot of variance kind of comes into play because ultimately it's going to be dependent on your goals. I mean, there's a lot of numbers that you can crunch to look at, okay, well, what's the most optimum? But sometimes the most optimum isn't the right fit for a person. And I'll kind of explain that a little more. So here's some of the different ways that we can classify debts, right? So there's debts that have the highest interest rates, the smallest balances, the highest minimums. Of course, they all help you build credit. But what we'll do is look at, okay, well, should I pay off my highest interest rate debt first, or should I pay off the one that has the smallest balance and build momentum? So say, I use even numbers, not that I'm not good at math, because it's just easier, right? So say collectively every month you have $100 to pay for debt, right? And we all wish it was that, right? So say you have $100 a month to pay for debt, you have an option of, hey, there's this thing over here, this chunk of money that's charging me a 10% interest rate and the balance is $10,000. Or, I could choose to pay off this other one that has a $2,000 balance, but they're charging me 15% interest rate. So it's a higher interest rate, lower balance, higher balance, lower interest rate. What one do we tackle first? It's going to depend on what you want to do. So, the building momentum aspect of it is saying, hey, I owe $100 a month. I'm going to pay down that smallest balance. And, they were requiring me to pay $20 a month. So now realistically, my debt obligation is only $80 a month. Well, one of the strategies that's out there to build momentum, it's called a debt snowball. It's very popularized by like Dave Ramsey. I think that's one of the best things that some of the best content he's put out is how to get out of debt. And, what we do is pay off that smaller balance, but instead of now dropping down to $80 a month, we keep it fixed as if we're still paying the $100 a month, but now we're reappropriating that $20 a month from the small balance account that we paid off. And maybe now we tackle the next smallest one, and that'll free up another $20 a month to be thrown at the next one, and so on and so forth until you get out, or at least you get significantly ahead. Okay. So once we've, identified, taken inventory of the debts that we have, once we've categorized them, we need to start creating a debt payment plan. And this realistically, having a debt payment plan, as I said, this is the only way that you're really going to be able to get some peace of mind and some confidence with what you're doing financially when it comes to kind of getting out of this. But having this debt payment plan, it's going to, first of all, it's just going to give you control, right? You're going to be aware of everything. It's not going to feel overwhelming and unknown to you anymore because you know the debts you have, you know what they cost, you know what they cost if you let them go for too long. And once you have a strategy in place, you are in control and it feels a lot better. So we're able to build momentum with this as well. Like I mentioned in my previous example, we can keep using the payments that we're making as we're paying off debts to extrapolate the payments onto other debts as long as we maintain discipline. And that's the biggest thing with all of this is maintaining the discipline. I've worked with quite a few people now where we created a debt repayment strategy. They were really comfortable with it. They were really confident with it. But as humans do, when they see money, they spend it. The second we get the first debt paid off, and then all of a sudden there's an additional, couple, let's just call it that $20 a month, instead of them being like, oh, now I can throw that $20 a month at my loans, they'll just start spending it, right? So having the discipline to stick to a debt repayment plan is probably one of the most important things. With a debt repayment plan, you need to have some kind of balance that you're able to find between paying down the debt as well as saving for your financial future. Neither of those things should ever get in the way of one another. It should be a congruent, consolidated plan. Okay. And then, of course, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel once we get all these things mapped out. Going back to our fourth pillar of financial freedom, or not financial freedom. I'm not some finance guru. Of financial wellness is having the freedom to enjoy the life that you want to live, right? Having a debt repayment plan is going to show you the end point of specifically finitely, if I do X, Y, Z, I'm going to be done by B day, right? I ran out of letters in the alphabet. Sorry. So when we're creating a debt repayment plan, of course, we need to be working within our budget. So this is just a rule of thumb. It's not going to be completely applicable to everybody, but when we're looking at it and trying to keep a debt payment plan within our budget, the rule of thumb is kind of trying to keep debt payments, specific debt payments, so college, student loans, credit cards, less than 20% of what our income is. Okay. So remember, we still need our cash flow to live the lifestyle that we want to live. So typically, this is kind of a comfortable number. Above and beyond that, people could still enjoy their life, right? You don't need to go into full shutdown mode, no experiences anymore until debts are gone. As long as we're being responsible with a portion of the inflow and being disciplined, like I said, with it, we can usually make that work. So one of the best ways that we do that's tackling one debt at a time. This is kind of what I was talking about earlier when we're looking at that debt snowball methodology, right? So, deciding whether or not I want to pay my biggest balance first or my smallest balance first or the highest interest rate or the lowest interest rate, which really you don't always want to do the lowest unless it's the lowest balance. But, it's important to tackle one thing at a time. And that's what we found to be the most successful for people is, like I say, get rid of one debt and then be disciplined to use what that minimum payment is from that debt and throw it onto the next one, snowballing it one after another, right? Developing a timeline, this is all going to be dependent on, how much you're actually going to be allocating on a monthly basis to the loan. But by knowing, the last one here, tackling one debt at a time, knowing our inventory of debts, knowing what one we want to go after first, keep everything else at the fixed minimums, right? So say you have 5 different debts, right? And they have, each one has a $20 minimum. Let's just call it that, right? So we're at the $100 a month, if my math is mathing, right? And we say, okay, well, I got that one paid off. Now we're going to jump to the different one. With all these, once you have an inventory of the loans you have and the rates that you have and the minimum payments that there's so many calculators out there. Like I said, if you want me and my team to do it for you at no cost, I'm more than happy. My juniors are looking for more stuff to do, so I'd love to have them help you out. It's very easy to figure out how long it's going to take if you're doing X, right? So this is kind of what it looks like when we're paying down debt, right? Is if we're going to go down and tackle the loan number one, that black line way on top, we can get that out of there completely free and clear. And then we can go after loan 2 and subsequently 3, subsequently 4, and use the funds, the minimums that were required from those other loans and start reapplying them to the other loans to make this debt repayment faster. So that's what it means with the snowballing, is because your smallest debt all of a sudden becomes extra cash flow for your next smallest debt or your next highest interest payment, whatever you decide. There's no one specific way to do this. It just needs to be a concise plan that you feel you and your family, your household can be disciplined about tackling, right? So this is something that I mentioned prior to, is that we really want to manage or make sure to manage balancing debt as well as our different goals. So whether that's saving for college for kids, saving for retirement, a little bit of both. You still want to be paying down the debt, but you want to make sure your savings are going up as well. So what's the benefit of that? Compound growth. That's the number one thing. Einstein called it the ninth wonder of the world, for a reason, right? So over time, we should see our debt decreasing and our savings increasing. But it's very important that we start to see saving early. Okay, so let me show you a different example here. So both of these individuals, let me get a little drink here. Both of these individuals start with the same debt. Okay, so they had just over $10,000 of debt. They're both paying the same interest rate. So what happened here is person A, they paid their they paid $2,000 a month. They didn't save, or I'm sorry, $200 a month. They didn't save anything. They didn't start saving until their debt was paid off. Okay. So what happened in this scenario is by paying the $200 a month on their $10,000 of debt at 10% interest rate, they were done debt free by 6 years, right? And then for that next year, they were able to save $200 a month, right? So they ended up with $2,400. Okay. So what happened on the second part, person B, instead of paying the $200 a month, they paid $175 a month, but they also were saving $25 a month. So maybe into like a Roth IRA, right? That's where I would recommend it. And I don't know you, but so technically that's not advice, but that's a great spot to park money, right? So same deal, like this person, what they did is they pushed back the year that they would have it paid off. Okay, so instead of having the $10,000 paid off in 6 years, person B took 7 years. However, because they were saving that $25 a month, instead of ending up with $2,400 at the same 7 year time frame, they actually were able to save an additional 700 something dollars. They ended up with 3130 over the course of that loan. Because remember, that's compounding over time. That $25 that they put down in year one, or whatever, the 300 bucks they put down in year one, from year one to year seven, that money accumulated interest every single year, and it's working for you. Okay. Now, it's not to say that the extra year of being in debt wasn't working against you, but when you stretch things out, it makes a lot more sense for you to be doing a little bit of both. Because then when the debt's done, you actually have a space that you're building from instead of starting from nothing. And I see this all the time as people get very overwhelmed and stressed out by debt. And they feel that it's best to put all of their, free cash flow towards paying down the debt. And truthfully, that's not always what we want to be doing. Okay. So let's kind of put our plan into action. Reflect on how you got into debt. Is this because of bad debt or good debt? Are you into debt because you went to school to get a better job and now you're earning more money? There's nothing bad about that. Is it because you purchased a home? Okay, there's nothing bad about that. But one of the biggest things that I want people to reflect on is if you ran up a bunch of credit card debt, what's going to prevent you from doing that again? So typically, I see people when they get into a lot of credit card debt, having a lot of problems from a personal finance standpoint. And the biggest thing, like I said, is having a budget. These people are just spending all their money. They're spending more money than they need or than they have. And it's an extrapolating problem. Fast forward a couple years, now you got 5 figures of credit card debt based on stuff that you were just buying for your house or vacations that maybe you shouldn't have been on. So really reflect on, okay, well, what actually got me to where I am today? And what am I going to do about it? Right. Changing bad spending habits. So I already precursored that one. That's probably one of the biggest things that I see, at least on the credit card debt side of things. So one of the biggest reasons why people are getting into that is because, either they had poor spending habits or something happened and they did not have an emergency fund, as we discussed prior. Minimize taking on new debt of course, as you're trying to pay down a lot of debt that you already have. It's not always a good idea to take on new ones, whether that means starting a business or going back to school while you're still buried in loans, or, starting to spend more money than you have. There's a lot of ways that you can take on new debt, buying a new car instead of a used car. There's so many things. Just really understand where you are, reflect on where you are, know your spending habits. And if you feel that now is not the good time to take on debt, don't do it. Renegotiate where you can. So this is something that I already precursored as well. a lot of carriers that are out there, a lot of the creditors that are going to be out there, they're very fine renegotiating terms with you. So maybe that means, extend or lowering your minimum payment on one loan. Or like I said, for example, with student loan stuff, a lot of these carriers, Nelnet is the one that I deal with the most, I would say, is they can change your payment plan. You're not required to pay them whatever number they tell you on your statement. If you call them and say, hey, like you're telling me I have to pay $500 a month for my student loans, could I do 300? They'll change it for you without really penalizing you. You get penalized because you're going to be in an interest period for longer, but if it makes sense for your overall plan to free up the money from there and allocate it somewhere else first, usually you can do that very easily. It's just a quick phone call to the provider. It's important to build a credit history and know what your credit score is. This is one of the best ways to get out of debt, I would say, is because a lot of credit card carriers actually have a lot of software available to their members or their card holders at no cost. They'll give you a credit score and they'll give you a list of 15 different ways that you can improve it, right? So it's important to keep an eye on it. Now, a credit score in and of itself doesn't really mean anything for your personal financial situation. However, if you ever want to get more debt, a credit score is very important. So I know it sounds funny, but if you want to buy a car, if you want to purchase a home, they're really going to look and scrutinize your credit score as a benchmark for your personal financial wellness. So if your score is, in the toilet right now, however you're getting that score, whether you use a Capital One card, if you look at their credit score tab, they'll give you examples of how you can bump up your score by multiple points easily, usually. And that should be baked into your plan, right? Last thing, make sure that you save. I think I really want to hammer that home because, like I said, a lot of people, when they see the debt number, they freak out and they want to throw all their money at it. That's all well and good. But even if you're saving $25, $50 a month into a Roth IRA or something like that on the side while paying down debt, you're gonna thank yourself 10 years from now when you don't have the debt and a substantial amount of money in a Roth IRA. All right. So that's kind of the whole show. I really appreciate, once again, everybody that does come out for these or watches the recordings, which in this case is going to be everyone. Here's all my contact info. So, our team, we have an agreement with the employers that we do these for. We offer consultations at no cost to people. If you need help putting together a debt repayment plan, me and my team are more than happy to hop on a quick Zoom call with you, kind of help you take inventory, help you categorize some things, and make sure that you're still on track to meet your goals while, getting ahead of all this. So without further ado, I will let all of you go. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me, even with just a basic question. I'm pretty responsive even on vacation. So have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone, and happy fall. We're just about there. So it's awesome. Thank you again, and I will talk to you all soon. See you next month. Have a good one. Bye.